Hey guys, here's Jeff and Matt Kite.
And Ryan.
And we're here to try something a little different. Maybe we've done it in the past, but we're just going to kind of go over. We had a session yesterday at our local spot up in Muskegon. And we're going to go over what we were riding. What I'm excited about, I got to finally ride with Hook Daddy. He's been so busy lately. He had a shoulder issue, right?
Yeah, for a while. It was good to get out.
Yeah, and he was working.
Warm water.
Yeah, it was nice. It was getting a little colder, but he was working remotely. I was in the shop. And start off the conversation, maybe we should talk about the conditions. We had our typical Northwest thermals, which we get here in the summertime. And a Northwest thermal usually starts mid-afternoon. We look for low humidity, and where we have high humidity in the morning, gets lower in the afternoon, and we get these sneaker little Northwest thermals that come in. Okay. And when we first got to the beach, it was kind of gusty. I think it was probably 16 to 19 to 21 maybe. Yeah. So it had a big gap in the wind, which we're going to talk about. You're going to pick up on some of the things that we're riding and what we felt and how things changed when the wind picked up. Yep. And the second part of our session, it was more of a steady 19 to 22, I would think.
Yeah. Not only did the wind pick up, the swell picked up a little bit. And it got fun for a while.
Real fun.
Real fun.
Real fun. So I had two parts to my session. I'm learning to para. I probably got a total of an hour and a half on the para, and I wanted to I'm kind of focused on it now, and so I was going to go out and take some video of my next session on the para, and so I was I chose for these conditions a 3.5, which I've always been on a 4 or a 5 meter para. So I sized down because I had a lot of success on my last session. I had a lot of luck though my way, and I was able to ride and stay upwind and go upwind and ride a little bit. Still had some disasters. I'm still learning. But anyways, in these conditions I set up, the idea was I was going to para, and I was going to set Ryan up on a setup, and then we were going to switch in the water. Well, that never happened. And I'll tell you why. I was on the Code S1300 foil, so I've gone big to learn to para on, and I've been looking for a wind that at least hits 19 to 20, and I was on a big board. I thought I had brought the 90 liter flux, but I actually brought 100, I believe, 20 liter SuperMarine. So it was a big board, which is fine. And so I was really excited to get out. My idea was I was going to get out and ride a little bit and then switch off with, what were you riding?
So I went out there on the Incest foil.
Which is a new one that we're testing out.
Yes, it is. New for us. And for the board, I had the Starboard, was it the Blue Carbon?
Yep.
Maybe set up.
Yep.
Yeah, 80 liter, 5'5", good board. And then the wing was the Duotone Float. First time on all that gear. Yeah. So I'd never ridden any of it before.
That's because it's been in my car, and I've been riding it a lot. But we did kind of partnered up yesterday. I got to the beach. We got to the beach about the same time, so pulled the gear out of my car, set it up. I set my Parawing gear up, and we were going to do the switcheroo. Go ahead, why don't you just launch in and tell us a little bit of how your first part of the session was when it was blowing 16 to maybe 19.
Yeah. Well, heading out there, I was excited to try the Parawing for the first time after you got done with it. But by the time I hit the water, this guy was long gone, and it seemed like maybe not the conditions to try and learn in. So Jeff will fill you in on how it went for him and what the conditions were like that didn't produce yesterday. So I ended up staying on the wing the whole time, which was fine when I first headed out there. I don't know, swell was maybe knee high with a few waist high rolling in.
Closer to waist, yeah. So how tall you are.
Yeah. it was pretty small. Rideable. I would say the sets coming in were fun and rideable when I first went out there. Anything else was very tough and frustrating. The wind was good for that 4 or 5 float that I had with about 1,000 square centimeter foil. Had no problem getting up on the board, getting up on the foil, taking off, riding, plenty of power to ride around. Didn't feel like I had a ton of power to really push it and go fast. I ended up coming in. Were you off the water then, or was I talking to Skip?
I was off the water at that point.
Yeah,
we met on the beach, and you said, something slow about this setup?
Yeah.
I said, I don't think it's the up and down wind. I don't know.
Yeah, it just felt a little slow. Yeah, part of it was the wind was shifty.
It was shifty.
It was definitely shifty.
Especially on the surface.
Yep, up and down. And you could kind of pick up on it the more you rode while you're up on foil. Even in the water, it was hard to tell.
Yeah.
A lot of times you can see it real clear on the water when you're hitting a big lull.
Yeah.
But it was kind of tough to read yesterday. So it was shifty.
The first part, the first half.
The first half.
Yeah.
And decent waves. So went out there for swell, riding around in the swell a little bit, caught a little bit of swell, could bounce around a little bit. The first thing I noticed from that Insys foil is it really pumped and accelerated while you pumped, which is one of the things I love about the Code gear. One of the things that I love about the Axis Art V2s is especially here, we get a variety of conditions. A lot of times not that real like clean swell where you can just point and downwind.
Yep.
You're hopping from wave to wave. You're doing a fair amount of pumping. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to pump and keep your speed up and get into that next swell that's peaking that you want to ride. So I noticed that right off the bat.
And you were doing a good job yesterday, man.
Yeah, thanks.
It's like ride a bike. You got right out there and started just ripping around, man. That's cool.
So I did notice pumped very well. Fun to ride. Seemed fairly fast. The swell there was a lot of current in the water.
There was.
That was one thing.
A lot of movement.
Abnormal for here. We usually only get that much current after it's been blowing for a couple days consistently. But for just an afternoon thermal, typically won't see too much current, but there was a lot of it out there. So fast enough to keep up with everything. I noticed that right off the bat without really spending too much time thinking about the other gear. That was the first thing that stuck out to me. But when I was riding in those conditions, just riding under wind power, I didn't seem like I had a ton of speed. Like I want to go a little faster. Like that's one of the things I think a lot of people like about winging is while you're waiting for some swell, waiting for some sets, you can get out there and you can rip and you can go fast. It's exciting in your downtime.
Especially on a foil, speeds are just exponential.
Yeah.
I mean, if you hit 20 plus knots the first time on a foil, you feel like I was flying. I mean, it's the sensation of being above the water. I mean, that's fast on a foil, but outside of the foil world, you're thinking 20 knots isn't that fast. But you're moving.
Yeah.
You can move.
Yep, for sure. So I was like, maybe it's the foil, maybe it's the wing, maybe it's a combo of the two. Turns out it was probably more the conditions than anything, which is another reason why we like to test gear in a variety of conditions and a lot of times.
Especially with the first time in all that gear.
Yes.
All three, which we don't normally do, change 3 variables. We like to change 1 variable.
Yep.
But we were up for changing it up. It's kind of the theme of the day.
Yeah, I was at home. I didn't have a gear in my car. I had my wetsuit and everything I needed there, but didn't have any of the other gear I've been riding. So Jeff had a whole bunch of extra gear, so I hopped on that, which was awesome. The board was great. It was stable, easy to ride, 80 liters, 5.5 by I think it was 23 wide. Just an easy, good all-around board for me, I would say.
Yeah.
Like nothing, didn't notice anything phenomenal, not difficult to ride. Like good stability, built speed pretty well, just easy to ride.
You look good on it. Like I said, man, you look real comfortable.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, tacking around, cutting around, riding the waves. How about the wing, the float?
Float's awesome. So yeah, we went out, rode for a while. I think I rode until you got in off the Parawing.
I did.
And I was kind of ho-humming a little bit, wondering why I wasn't riding a little faster. Then I stuck it out on the beach a minute, watched everyone else ride, and debating on putting something else up, switching my gear. And I'm glad that I stuck it out. Decided to just go back out there, ride for a while longer on the same stuff. And when I did that, the wind picked up a little bit.
Sure did.
It's another 4 or 5 knots. And the swell picked up.
It sure did.
You got fun.
Real fun.
Everything was over waist high. Yeah. Real fun to ride. I'd say for around here, had a decent amount of power, peaked up decent. We were able to catch some real long rides. It was very fast though.
Yeah, and you could surf them versus just ride them. You could add enough little pitch to it to ride them.
Yeah, enough power in those waves to carve around, go one way, then carve around, going the other way. So glad I stuck it out because the conditions improved and my experience on the gear improved as well. So again, going back to why we test in a whole bunch of different conditions, you want to make sure that you've got that gear in the right conditions, because obviously not having the right gear for conditions can affect how your session goes. So stuck it out, found the good swell up by the pier, started riding up there, making some laps, and
this is Pier Marquette Beach, Muskegon. When it's good, it's some of the best I feel, any place I've ridden in the world. It's incredible.
So the duotone float was phenomenal. I would say out of all the wings I've ridden in good wave conditions, that would be my top pick, purely for riding the swell. Whether I was going, let's see, yesterday, if I was going left, I was able to drag it behind me, luff it behind me, plenty of wind to float it, didn't have an issue with it twisting. Usually a lot of wings, when you drag behind you, sure, they might be stable for a minute, but they catch a gust or shifty wind, and it wants to tip on you or twist. And a lot of pressure in your wrist. No issues with that. Super stable, really easy to float. And there you go. It just floats real easy because, so I go left, I've got it in my right hand, and then I want to turn back and go right and switch to my left hand. And again, here's another point where a lot of the wings can start to twitch and don't float real well. And I can bring it back to my left hand real easy as I'm going right. And in those conditions, a lot of times if I stayed going right, or depending what I was doing on the wave, I'd have to sneak that hand down to the front of the boom just to get a little more control over it, because we were essentially matching the wind speed going downwind on those waves.
My experience in the float too, not to steal a little thunder from that, but you can walk it down the line too with it, and it doesn't fall in front of you. It stays up. It feels light. It's got that liftiness to it that we like with wave wings, but for sure. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I mean,
so segue super impressed with the float. Awesome wave awesome wing in the surf, in the swell. Really impressed there. As the conditions picked up, speed picked up. Didn't feel like the wing or the foil were holding me back. I mean, I would say I could be on a little bit smaller of gear for both the wing and the foil for the conditions we were in, but I was able to get on it and really push the speed a bit, which felt good. And
you said, the sizing down the wing, the float when the wind picked up, then the higher end, it does feel a lot.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Which is not intended for that, really, to be racing around in heavy wind, upwind, and trying to speed around. It's meant to be riding waves and floating around.
Yeah.
I mean, I think above average. I did a little review on it a couple weeks ago, but you did mention that to me initially, is what you thought a little bit.
Yeah,
like you would have sized down, maybe it would have been fine.
It's not your race wing. It's not like what you were riding, the Mode Pro, where you can go out there and just put the hammer down and go full speed. It's not designed to ride at that speed. It does still ride fast, I would say, but it is one of those wings you want to maybe size down, or at least size appropriate for conditions that you're in, to kind of get the max enjoyment out of it. Otherwise, if you're really pushing it in way overpowered conditions, like a lot of wings, it can start to feel a little big or draggy.
Well, your session, nice work there covering that session, because my session was very similar theme, but I started parawing. I think I had a little bit more of a rougher segue, but I did experience my whole session, big picture, started out kind of rough, ended really well. Just to give a little background, like I said earlier, I am just getting into parawinging, and I went into this session with a lot of confidence, because I've only had a couple hours on. A couple hours is not much to feel like you've had some success. My last session, I was in a little bit calmer water and then got out to the waves, and I was riding around and had no issues. So I walked into this session, like I said earlier, thinking I'm going to go out there on a smaller parawing now for the first time. And same foil, size up my foil. I don't normally ride this large of a foil, but for learning to para, Tucker encouraged me to go big. I'm glad he did, until I really get my skill set down with the para and understanding the power, and get going on it. But what happened was I went out with really high hopes, and a couple of things were working against me. It was far wavier to start out, and the wind in the waves were going the same direction towards 2 sandbars that are pretty shallow right now. So it's very hard to get off the shore with this big board and my Parawing. Initially, my first 2 sessions I've had, I've been able to put it on my board and the para didn't get wet, or I kept it in the air as I was walking out. But in this situation, I couldn't do that with all the waves and the big board, so I had to have everything collapsed. Yep. So it really made me started thinking post-session that it'd be nice to be able to stash my para maybe in a sack or something and have the handle somewhere else while I paddle out. So then when I when I throw it out, everything's not kind of just cobwebbed up. Yep. But anyways, I struggled to get off the shoreline because obviously when you're para, you kind of need to have a little space to maybe bear downwind and stand up and get some power into that wing, Parawing, and then bear down and then head back up. And I kept kind of getting pushed by the waves and the wind into the sand.
And there's a lot of current too, which can affect you, because if you're getting blown downwind, your apparent wind on your wing is going to be a lot lower than what it actually is. And
only being 3 hours into learning a new sport, obviously I have a lot of skills that are around the sport, but not putting them all together. I struggled. So I learned some things there, not to go with such a small Parawing until you really have a few more hours under your belt, and potentially look at the shoreline that you're walking out into. You really need to be aware when you're learning until you got the skill to not have added variables to make it difficult. I managed to get up for a little bit and ride just not actually up on foil. I was getting frustrated because every time I tried to put the wing out, there just wasn't much wind on the surface. I think it was down 15, 16 knots at those points, or holes. And I found with a para, when there's holes, it just falls in the water. Whereas if you have a wing, you can just kind of wait it out, or a kite, you keep your kite high and just kind of let it sit up there. But a para, it needs something. If it doesn't, it just goes in the water. So I got a lot of practice launching a wet Parawing, trying to get the leading edge and throwing it up and then, getting it. Meanwhile, with waves and the wind. So I learned a lot, but kind of struggled. I was able to do a little upwind tacking on my knees, so that was good, so I didn't have as long of a walk. But a long story short, I didn't get up on foil. But as I reflect back, I wasn't on the right size Parawing. And I believe the conditions added to that with the lack of hours I have in the sport. Despite riding for, minutes at a time. Actually, I was up 10, 15, 20 minutes in my last riding session, stashing the wing a little bit, riding some waves, going upwind, and actually tacking way back to the pier. I still have things to learn. And it's still important when you're learning a new sport, despite how much skill you think you have or how confident you are, the conditions are really important to add to that success. Because I did get frustrated and then have to walk back. I haven't had to do that in years. It's just kind of wore me out. So that's when I ran into you, and you came in and were like, I don't think it's a good day for you to try to para today. I mean, you're a few years younger than me, and you're a very good foiler, and I'm sure you'll pick it up quickly, but I think it's important to start out in the right conditions.
Yeah, as soon as you took off, or as soon as I got out there, and you probably didn't hit the water more than 5 minutes before me,
couldn't see
and
me.
I couldn't see you.
You're like, where is he?
I knew that if I was going to try it, would have been a wet rat session for me. So
it didn't turn out so well. But that's okay. It's part of the learning curve. You got to pay your dues. You got to be comfortable going back to being a beginner. When you're learning a new sport, you have to be able to suck up your ego and push through the hard stuff. And push through getting thrown around in the water. I got my lines tangled. I got the bar inside. But anyways, things did open up. I came in and I did rig. I had another set in my car. I do have a lot of gear in my car. I like to ride a variety of stuff. But I got on the 62, a KT 62, I think it was the Jinx Pro Carbon, 62 liter, and I put the North SF 830. I always get those mixed up, 830 or 850.
Yeah, you're on the
850.
I think it's 830.
830, I was right the first time. The 830, and which I've been spending a fair amount of time on 3 different foil sets that I like for wave riding: the North SF, the F1 Skate, and the Code S. I also have the 600 SF, but I got on the 830, and then I was on the Mode Pro, which is one of my favorites, wings, and got out, and I went from struggling, feeling like a beginner, not having any success, obviously, boom, back in my back in my zone, you know, back in what I'm comfortable with.
And you got out there right as the conditions were getting good too.
Oh yeah, getting real good. And I was just like, holy cow. I mean, those of you who are in the water sport realize sometimes your mind, you know, you start out in a rough session, things aren't going right. You know, you have a decision to make. Do you stick it out and try to get through it, or you just throw the towel in and leave? I'm glad I went back out and, you know, and redeemed it, because obviously I love that KT board, that Pro Carbon 62 when it's powered up. It's very light feeling. It's got a really good balance. It's thin, so you can really feel connected to the foil. And the foil, that 830 North SF carbon foil, is really easy and fun to ride in waves. Yeah. It's got enough speed and stability and carvability that it almost feels like you got training wheels on when you're talking about a surf foil. I say that in a good sense. You can just kind of relax.
It's smooth.
It's smooth. You can relax.
Smooth,
you don't have to
stable.
like. You don't have to feel like it's getting out of control or kicking back at you. You know, you can kind of just autopilot. And boy, did I feel autopilot and have fun on the waves that we had that day. It's kind of flowy, doing a lot of snaky turns. I went out on the outside to the big swell, did a couple short downwinders. You know, so I was really digging the board. I hadn't been on that 62 in a while. We used to call those little chicken nugget boards, but that was a little bit of in between hybrid of that. But still, I would consider that a board that'd only go up in powered conditions. Yeah. Because I'm 175 pounds. And when I get on with all my gear, I'm probably 185. That board's sinking under the water, you know, and it's not very long. I think it's right around 5 feet maybe, or just under. Anyways, that 2 combo was beautiful for the conditions. The wing I was in was beautiful for rocking upwind. I mean, that's what that North Moto.
Going fast. You had 4.8. It was blowing about 20. I was moving.
Powered up. Yeah, I hit about 25.7 knots speed, according to my watch. If it's accurate or not, which is fast. I mean, that's moving with that wing. So I felt really good ripping upwind. You know, the wing itself, you know, for doing tacks, putting it up over your head, feels a little heavy and it pushes down on you a little bit. But, you know, it's one that can take a wide variety of winds. You know, I was on a 4.8, which a lot of guys are on 3.5s and 4s. So that says something about that, you know, that Mode Pro, you can ride that in powered up conditions and not feel like you're too out of control. I would have picked a smaller size, but I didn't have that option that day, so yesterday. So I rode that, had a great time on it. I'm used to it in the waves. It's a little heavy. It feels like you have to muscle it around a little bit, you know, but, you know, that's all right. You know, you kind of just have to adjust a little bit with it. It's not like the float where it's just kind of feathery around you, like the Supernatural reading where it's really, you know, really easy to around you. But all in all, wonderful session. You know, like you said, we had the nice little bumpers and waves on the inside that actually cleaned up.
Oh, yeah.
And it was smooth in between them, which we don't get a lot around here. And then I went to the outside, and of course, was kind of poaching waves, you know, out there in a little bit bigger swell. But you had to like be looking for your next wave. So good combo, you know, what I had on. You know, if I had to change one thing about my session, the second part of my session, you know, I might have gone with maybe the float, stolen that from you. But you know.
I was gonna say let's do a little. For the conditions that we had there when it picked up and got good, we had that like waist to chest high kind of, I would consider it like peaky swell. We don't get a whole lot of like what most people would consider big waves around here. But it was breaking. There was a little bit of white water at the top of it. It was waist to chest high at the from the bottom to the top of the wave. And what if you'd swap any of the gear you had out, because obviously we just grabbed what you had in your car and didn't necessarily, I didn't necessarily pick anything specific for that day because I was trying to ride some new stuff. What would you change, and what would anything specific come to mind that you would swap it out to?
I would swap out the wing. I would have been like in a 4 or 5 or 4 meter, either the Supernatural or the float. Probably been my options, the 2 options I would have grabbed that I do have access of right now. And potentially drop down on my foil, believe it or not. I've ridden that, I think it's a 680 SF, and I am shocked at how much lift that has and how fast that foil can be and controllable in the conditions that we had. So I might have sized down, believe it or not, on the foil.
the speed would have been good too.
It would have.
Because the waves were moving.
There were less pumping.
Yep.
Just stayed right with them. So that would have been the two things I would have changed. And of course, I already said my first part of my session, parawinging, I would have gone with the 4.0.
Yeah.
Not the 3.5 that I was. I know it doesn't sound like a big difference, but when you're a newbie, I needed that power to pop up right away.
Yep. Yeah, I would have stuck with the wing. That float was perfect for what we had. Mm-hmm. Good swell, good conditions to carve around in, hop back and forth. I would have probably, you know what, the board was great. I wouldn't change anything there. The foil, I probably would have went a little smaller. We just have the 980. We don't have anything smaller, or at least I didn't see anything smaller in your car.
We're just demoing it, checking it
out. Something closer.
We don't sell that. We're not selling that foil as of now.
Right.
But we sell their wings.
Yep. Something closer to a 800 foil, I think, would have been a little more ideal for me, because I did notice with just how fast those waves were moving that sometimes I really had to get on it and pump really hard to accelerate and stay up in front of them. So something just a little bit smaller where I wouldn't have to do that. Wouldn't have to work as much, make it a little easier.
Yeah. Could have been because you've been off the water for a little bit.
Yeah, could have been.
I'm just messing with you. Like I said, you picked it up pretty quick. It's been a while. You've had a couple sessions at your shoulder.
Yeah, a few.
Yeah, but not a lot.
Spent a lot of time on the foil drive. And,
yes, you have. That's where you've been really in your wheelhouse.
Got some more videos and info on those to come here, but been back on the wing again, which has been awesome. And good session, great gear. As always, conditions make a huge difference. And
how much do you weigh? You never told me how much you weigh.
So I'm about 185 right now.
So we're pretty close. You got maybe a few kilos on me, but right around there. So, yeah, there you go. Kind of a session review. We kind of dove deep into the gear that we rode, what the conditions were like. It was a classic Pier Marquette, Muskegon, Northwest thermal in the summer. Kicked up about 2 o'clock and came down about 7 o'clock.
Warm water, which we don't get a whole lot. I think the water's already cooled off 5 or 6 degrees since yesterday.
It's come down a little bit, but anyways, I think we covered it quite well. Some of our gear. You know, if you guys also have some comments you make the comments in the chats if you'd like down below there. But thanks for listening, and we'll do a few more of these down the road. Again, this has been Jeff from Matt Kite.
And Ryan.
Enjoy the stoke.